Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? It seems like that's the in thing right now. Well, do I have the people for you? Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and extremely easy to use. And now, Anchor will match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid for podcasting right away. To get started, go to anchor.fm/start. Once again, that's anchor.fm/start. Welcome back, everybody, to the episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast, part of the Off the Ball Network. This is episode 197, dedicated to a man who on May 20th, 1984, recorded his first win at the major league level. He then played for the Boston Red Sox. It was Mr. Roger Clemens. And as always, thank you for listening and downloading another episode of the podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Jeff Hunt, not only the host of the Jeff Needs Sports podcast, but also the Jeff Needs Help podcast, as well as him and I discuss ways to improve college football. Jeff and I both love college football. We watch it every single Saturday throughout the week as well when games are on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, or Friday. Opening weekend in college football, you'll get a game on a Sunday. You'll get a game on a Monday as well. We love the game. We're both Ohio State Buckeye fans, football fans. We will not discuss that and go into deep depth about, let's say, breaking down the team for next season. We're not doing that. But this is a great time, especially this time of year, to discuss things that can improve a game that so many people love. I love it. I'm sure many of you might love college football. And there may be some flaws, some things that you may see, you may know about that you say, the game is great, but it can be better. I have my own list. You're the listener. I have mine. You'll hear mine in a second. And Jeff has his. We both discussed 3 separate personal ways to us that the game can improve. But before we get to that, we're going to do something we started last week and continue this trend of having an opener, a topic at the top of the show before getting into the interview of the day. Before I get to that, got to remind you of one quick thing. This episode or this interview, this discussion that Jeff and I had, it will be a 2-part, kind of a 2-week series. So part 1 will be today. Part 2 will be a week from today on the 27th of May. So stick around for this week and next week. Tell all your friends if you want to improve college football, come to the Jay Stevens Podcast. Jeff and Jay have some phenomenal ideas to do that. With me growing up in Indianapolis, Indiana, not being born in Indianapolis, but that's where I spent most of my life, the Indianapolis 500 has been a big event to a lot of people that I know. It's a major event for IndyCar racing fans in general, because a lot of NASCAR fans will come to Indianapolis for this event. But being in Indianapolis, the month of May, Memorial Day weekend, has a couple things in mind. Well, more than that. One, Memorial Day weekend, the pool opens up. Well, another thing, Memorial Day weekend is kind of like the de facto start of summer, or the time when most kids are already going to be getting out of school. Yes, summer doesn't officially start until June, but it's the summertime when Memorial Day weekend comes around. Barbecues, pool parties, all that stuff starts Memorial Day weekend. And then also, the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500. I'm a big sports fan, as you know, and I have never, ever in my life been to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 500. I've been there for fundraisers, and I've ran a couple half marathons that a part of the course was on the 2.5-mile oval, but I've never gone to the race, not a practice, until a couple days ago. This past Tuesday, my buddy Jason Wall and I went to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the opening day of practice for the Indy 500, as it is called. And let me tell you, I have ran across that thing, ran around it, but I don't think you really realize how massive the inside of the oval is until you start walking around inside and going from one place to another place to another place to another place, just looking around and seeing what is inside. There are RVs inside where the drivers will stay the entire week, a week and a half, couple weeks that they are in Indianapolis. There is a golf course inside. There is a museum inside. There's so much inside of that oval. You think 2.5 miles, yes. But as I'm in the stands looking out, oh my gosh, man, it's a different thing from seeing a picture to actually being inside of that big, massive stadium. The 500 generally has about 300,000, 350,000 people attended every single year. This year, the capacity is 40% or 135,000 people. I know they normally sell out. They normally have just tickets that are coming in that are outside of the capacity that the seating capacity every year. They have concerts and stuff on the infield every single year. But me going to the track for the opening day of practice, it was fun. It was enjoyable. It was very almost like a history lesson. Because going to the museum, going and being with my buddy Jason Wall, who has been going to these races for probably 25, 30 plus years, he just walks around and says, oh, I know that guy, know who that guy is. President Doug Bowles. This is the museum. They used to drive these cars. This is kind of the transition from tires, the transition from the headwear, the transition from how the protection of these drivers in these cars has evolved from the beginning days till now. There is a good chance, I have not been yet, but there's a good chance I will go to a race at some point in time because I do want to embark and be someone that goes to multiple different sporting events. Baseball's fun, football's fun, basketball's fun. Never been to a tennis match. I've been to high school track and field meets. But now I think it's a great time to kind of broaden my horizon, be more of the well-rounded sports podcaster that I believe every podcaster should be, and go to enjoy more sporting events that I might not enjoy every single day. The practice was fun at the Indy 500, but going to race day, being there on race day, Memorial Day weekend, if not this year, one day soon, your boy will be there. Let's go ahead and take a trip to Northeast Ohio to enjoy my fun conversation with Mr. Jeff Hunt as we discuss ways to improve college football. And joining us now here on the Jay Stevens podcast, he's been here before, probably quite a bit. He might be a guy that comes on 2 or 3 times a year, which is saying a lot for how frequent the episodes do come out. But it's Jeff Hunt, not only the host of the Jeff Needs Sports podcast, but also the host of the Jeff Needs Help podcast. It's so many words. I'm tongue-tied right now. My guy, Jeff Hunt, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Once again, you know I love being on your show. I'm honored each and every time you ask me on, and I love the conversation we are about to have, and I know everybody else is too.
Jeff, I could have thought of a better person to have this conversation with. You and I both love college football. You're wearing an Ohio State shirt right now, the Ohio State behind your head. I'm wearing just the de facto neutral Indiana hat with the Indiana symbol state logo on the top of my hat here. College football, it's a sport we love. You live there in Ohio. You have loved the Buckeyes since you were a youngster. I didn't get to Ohio State Buckeye football till I was already, 12, 13 years old, but I haven't looked back. But when you love something, there's ways for you to attempt to improve it. You and your marriage, you with fathering your kids, myself, just a podcasting game for both of us, and just the things I do outside of that as well. We try to strive to improve the things that we love. And just as you know, Jeff, I know, and all college football fans know, college football can improve. And this is the time of year that these hypothetical conversations are had.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great conversations, and you said it right. I think about this a lot because I've saw other sports do this. It's so easy, specifically as an Ohio State fan. The best thing for me would be to let everything stay status quo because it benefits us. But it only benefits 5 to 10 schools in the entire country. Everybody else is being left behind. The sport, it's basically this. It's become about the numbers playing each other and not the actual sport on the field. And as the sport of football evolves and grows and gets better and the athletes get better across the board, we have to stop narrowing this down to a few teams have a chance every year. We have to start mixing in everybody to be the sport that I really love. Once again, it doesn't benefit my team, but it benefits the sport, some of my ideas that I have.
You have some ideas, I have some. These are actually some that I have had written down in my notebook for, be honest with you, a couple weeks now. And I was wondering, when am I going to discuss this? When is this going to go forward? And I've seen your list. You've seen mine. The people listening, they don't know what's going to come out of our mouths over the next, some odd minutes that we're going to be discussing these topics here. But Jeff, you're the guest. I'm going to defer to you. Go ahead and list off your first reason that college football, why you think college football can improve, and what your first reason as far as how this game can be improved.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. My first one is we need to stop using and I put in quotes, the official preseason rankings, and we just need to. This is probably, a little outside the box. We need to stop using the AP and the coaches poll as these official rankings. Essentially what these rankings are is to help promote the games. But what's unfair about that is you want to promote an early season game, you're going to rank those two teams higher. I don't care how legit they say it is. And then it does a couple things. It creates hurdles for lower ranked teams. Now they have to prove that they can jump 20 teams that a bunch of guys in an office said were better than them before anybody plays the game. And I don't like that. So, pro sports has done this for years. They don't have a ranking beside NFL games, and people know when there's a big NFL game. You don't need rankings beside NBA teams to know. And what I wish they would, I understand it looks great when 2 plays 3, but that holds too much weight. And then if these voters are wrong, you get to 10 games into the season and say the number 2 team might get credit for beating the number 4 team, but when you really go back, that team should have never been number 4. And it creates these unfair advantages because of a number beside their name. It only benefits the networks. It doesn't benefit the teams. And it just creates more of this eliteness that we really need to get out of college football. I have no problem with people like podcasters like us, networks like Off the Ball Network, creating their own top 25. You can debate it, but it really needs to stop being beside the teams. I'm still okay with the official playoff rankings as we do it now. If you want to wait till 8 weeks in and then rank the teams when everybody's seen play, and some of my ideas later add to that. But let us media members debate who's the best. Let everybody else see it on the field. If it says Alabama, Michigan, and they don't have a ranking, people still understand. But what if it's, what it'll eliminate is, you'll see a team not play good early in the season. You're like, oh, wow, that 25 team almost upset them. But if they don't have that ranking there, maybe you come away going, oh, wait, Memphis is a better team than, Mississippi State. Maybe we need to rethink, how we see these teams. I know it's going to take a long time. I project that if we did this for 20 years, just like the NFL and every other sport, we would get this stereotype that the numbers are all knowing out of our head.
Jeff, I was thinking about that very topic about eliminating the polls, and I have no problem with it. And it goes back to why I think the polls were put into place anyway. Back in I think the 20s, 30s, I think the AP poll became an official poll, maybe the 40s. Those were the ways that your national champion was crowned. There was no national championship game. The youngsters, maybe you're young, and all you know is college football playoff. Where there was a time period that there was no playoff, and it wasn't that long ago. There was a time period when there was no national championship game, and that wasn't that long ago. Even though if you go back to the 90s, there were a couple different systems, but your Big Ten, Pac-10 back at that time weren't used there. Those polls were used for a purpose from basically a decade ago, or almost a century ago, but things have changed now. And as time changes, as things change, eliminating the polls, yeah, they're great talking points. And not going to lie to you, Jeff, I'm going to tell you this now. Locked on Buckeyes, I think this week we're going to be talking about a coach's poll, a coach's ranking system that I know CBS Sports is putting out. Why? To fill space, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you. It's basically a talking point to fill space, and that's what we're going to be doing. But those polls, their purpose, I think, is dead. I think it's been dead for a while. I was fine, like you, BCS, College Football Playoff, come out week 8, week 9. There's a purpose for that, a talking point for that. But those held weight at the end of the season. The AP poll, the coaches poll, the Sagarin rankings, all these other rankings that are out there people don't even know about. If you eliminated all of those and keep some of the computer ones, the Sagarin, Harris, and eliminate the coaches and the AP, I do think you'll have a more intelligent conversation, and Jeff, even a more intelligent, not just conversation, a more intelligent fan.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's my whole point is, make people take a second look. I know it looks great, to see those numbers, but it's just time to go. It's time to let the play decide itself on the field and quit making these teams overcome these rankings, and then especially when you put limits on how many spots you can jump. That seems to be the biggest problem, but, you know.
No, I'm there with you. Jeff, first thing on my list, and I look at it here, first way that college football, the game can improve. Have one voice and one group of people govern the sport. This also goes back to the 50s, I believe, 50s or 60s. I'm going to do a deep dive on this. Haven't gone back into it to do it just yet. But I think it was the 50s or 60s, maybe the 40s, when the NCAA kind of realized they couldn't run the sport, or they didn't run the sport, and the conferences began to run everything, which is why the SEC and their tradition that has been so heavy going back to that time period, your Big Ten, Pac-10, I don't know if that was a conference back then, the old school Southwestern Conference. So you have all of these old school conferences that were governing and running themselves, and I don't think this should have been a conversation just because of COVID. You can go way back and look at just simply the scheduling in college football and see how the schedule really has been a problem, because you have the SEC, you have the ACC. They play 8 regular season conference games. They play 1 FCS school every single year. Then they play their 3 regular non-conference games. And a lot of those schools, SEC specifically, they don't travel at all. If they travel up north, say north of Tennessee for a non-conference game, it's rare. And I doubt they're playing your Ohio State, your Michigan, your Wisconsin, your Iowa. You're not playing those schools, especially early in the season, because that's generally when you get that loss. And that loss early on is a bad look on your resume, on your schedule. So I think one governing body, and I told you, Jeff, there's an odd way that I think this can be solved very, very quickly. It's probably unpopular when people hear the 4 letters that are going to come out of my mouth. Not ESPN. But I think if the NCAA runs college football, I think you're still going to have those people that are negative on the NCAA, everything they do. That's not going to change. But if we see the NCAA, they govern and run other sports, and nobody complains about how they run the FCS level or D2 level or D3 level. The NCAA men's and women's basketball championship tournament every single year. Phenomenal. People look at certain things that the NCAA does wrong, and I'm right there with them. The NCAA is not perfect. But in totality, the body, the NCAA, that runs the collegiate sports does a phenomenal job, gives so many athletes and so many individuals a platform and the ability to be able to play at the college level. And Jeff, I really think if the NCAA runs things, they can still let the conferences do their thing, but also kind of run the scheduling as well. The conferences will hate that, but it will, Jeff, I do believe, having the NCAA run college football, one person, one voice, that will improve the game.
Yeah, you're totally right. We need to stop letting, 10 or 5 huge programs, whatever it is, run the sport. It's crazy. Like you said, track and field, you don't hear, they have these issues, other sports. I think if we would start, we understand that money's a problem. It's a huge problem because everybody wants their cut, but they run all these other sports. If they started running college football like a sport and more of an even sport, things will even out over time. And I understand it's all about who gets all this money. Right now, essentially 2 or 3 media networks. Disney runs college football. They do. They control the playoffs. They control the vast majority of the primetime games. Fox has finally stepped in. They control the award ceremonies, the Heisman ceremony. So there's no way that you can tell me that it's an even playing field when you have a conglomerate like that running things. And there's no way that you can tell me that a team like Cincinnati, for example, that was really good in the other 5 last year, how are they going to squeeze into that? When the ones at the top, have all the money and have all the power, and that's exactly what I mean. We need to shuffle this thing around. If we even out the playing field, if people are patient, I promise we will have a way better sport than even we do now. As much as we love it, I think what people love now, to touch on, they love the passion of college football. They love the pageantry. They love the look of it. Several people in regional love the game. But I think that we need to get to where everybody appreciates the game. The history is still going to be there, but things have to evolve. We can't, pretty soon we're going to have 12 teams that people care about every year, and everybody else is going to it's going to be in a different division, probably literally. But yeah, I like that, and I like that you had an actual option. You didn't just have a, we always say, if you have a problem, come with a solution, and you did, and it makes sense.
Yeah, man. Jeff, what's number 2 on your list? We could go all day just explaining number 1s on ours. What's number 2 on your list?
I've got players need a voice.
Okay.
Essentially, I don't understand why we have, over 100, I think it's 100 and around 32 teams just in, the playoff conferences. You're talking almost 100 kids a team. You got all these thousands of players, and they don't have an actual voice in the decision making. And I mean like real decision making, like not like, guidelines and transfer and all that stuff. That's one thing. I'm talking, why can't they have a voice in rules on the field? Why can't they have a voice in targeting? Why can't they express what they do and don't like about their game and how to fix it? And I said the benefit, and of course everybody always just wants to dismiss them because they're young and spoiled athletes. We hear so much of that. Okay, but this gives them accountability. If these guys get together and they decide, okay, we vote this on scheduling or targeting or whatever, if it works out, good for them. They made a difference. If it doesn't, then they learned accountability. Like, yeah, you can't just vote on whatever you want. And this also teaches each one of them. It teaches teamwork, communication with each other. Like, you're going to have, I'm not saying unionize, but you've got to all get together. So you're going to have leaders on each teams. You're going to have, guys that understand. They're learning about business. They're learning about accountability. They're learning about being unselfish. They're learning about leaders, all the things that we want student athletes to become. Why can't they do? And it doesn't cost a dime. It does not cost a dime to give them a say in things. It's, yeah, sure. Is it taking some of the power away from the older white people that have been running it for years? Okay, that's fine. I think that's a great start. Give these student athletes a chance, to show everybody like they're not what a lot of people think they are. There's some, we got future leaders that come out of college every day, but for some reason in sports we act like it's impossible. I think people would be shocked if you heard them out and heard their ideas. They're the ones on the field. They understand what's going on. They understand They can understand recruiting restrictions, violations, drug testing. Like I say, practice time, things that are unfair. They listen to them, give them a voice, and let them help us grow the game and move into the future.
Jeff, I'm going to play devil's advocate very, very quickly. This is a conversation I've had with my dad, not with this whole topic, but this kind of devil advocate kind of conversation in regards to letting the young men, the athletes, this is all young men, but also we know that, yes. So, but women's sports in college, they can improve as well, but this is a men specific conversation. What do you say about the people that say, well, Jeff, if you let the young men, because of the numbers that are there inside the NCAA, 132 teams, about 100 players per team roughly. What about the AAU and high school ranks? Because there's a lot of people there, youngsters, that make up that level as well. And there may be somebody listening saying, well, Jeff, I get what you're saying, but if it starts in college, it's going to be a trickle-down effect, and we're going to be having 15, 16, 17-year-old young men, young women in high school and in AAU try to run that level. What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, and that's absolutely going to happen. And I understand that we're never going to get to a point to where, anything under 18 is recognized as an adult and all these things. But I would also say that I encourage the input. I'm not even going so far as to say that every player ought to have a say. I don't even know what the percentage is, but I think we got to start somewhere. What I would say to that is I think that those 15 and 16-year-olds ought to have input and at least have the conversation, even if they're completely off base just because of youth. Then the adults that have more experience and stuff, the coaches explain that, they talk it out. So much, even like say when I raised my kid, even with the presidential election, no, he couldn't vote till he was 18, but I still asked him his opinion. Like, well, what do you think? Whether he had any basis for it or not, I wanted him to think about, what his weight on that subject meant. So I think that absolutely at every age, because I think if you bring him into it and then you also explain to him the downsides, that's the problem. We keep telling young people, we know what's good for you. we don't really explain why. We don't let them see the other side of it. As someone that's in business, ran a business by myself. You'd hire somebody and they're like, well, I do this, you're making all the money. Okay, let them see all the decisions I have to make in a day. Let them see my bills come in. Let them see the liability. Let them see this and that, and then let them decide what they think of it. If they still think that way, that's fine. But a lot of people are like, okay, I see that side of it. You know what I mean? So I think it would be important to do that. I mean, I know you got to stop somewhere. At some point, but then maybe when that 15 or 16-year-old gets to college, he's like, oh yeah, I get this. Like, I know that sounds like a good plan, dude, but where I went to school, we tried that and it failed. So now you've got a conversation going on, and these guys are helping each other think more critical thinking. And I don't think there's a downside to that. I mean, I'm all for it.
That's all for today. Come back next week to hear part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Jeff Hunt as we go over ways to improve college football. If you're a person that would love to follow Jeff on Twitter, follow him on Twitter at jhunt006. Once again, that's at jhunt006. A lot of great things coming from Jeff, not just sports related, comic book related, movie related. He's a jack of all trades. He loves college football. That's why he was ideal for this conversation. Thank you guys so much for listening and enjoying another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter as well at jstevenspod, as well as send your emails to me send them to jstevens317 at gmail.com. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that are searching for a new podcast to listen to come across this one. Then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are almost willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So no matter if this was your first episode or if you have been listening since episode number 1, be sure to let people know about the podcast. This was episode 197 of the Jay Stevens Podcast. I will see you next time.